We made all these decisions to offer you a choice.
When you fight fires together, you become a family. In this family, everybody comes home.
Don't think, just do it.
Chicago Fire, Monday to Thursday night on Pearl's Midnight Drama.
Health authorities warn of flu outbreak with 37 deaths so far this year. Fallout from Occupy cited as reason for Hong Kong's fall in global city ranking. And the European Central Bank opens the money floodgates. Good evening. Health authorities have reported at least 37 flu-related deaths so far this year. A leading microbiologist has warned that the situation could worsen during the Lunar New Year holiday next month. Liz Yoon reports.
Growing health concerns here in Hong Kong during the peak flu season. According to latest figures from the Centre for Health Protection, 37 flu patients were admitted to the intensive care units of hospitals in the first 2 weeks of this month. And in the past week, there were 41 such cases. 27 deaths related to influenza were recorded in the past week, raising January's total to 37. Most of the deaths were senior citizens aged over 67. More than 90% of the most serious cases involved the H3N2 strain. Microbiologist Ho Pak Leung predicts the number of serious cases and deaths will go up, especially around the Lunar New Year period, a busy time for traveling.
Given that the prevalent H3N2 has mutated and the much lower efficacy of the influenza vaccine, we could anticipate a more severe influenza over the next 1 to 2 months.
Secretary for Food and Health Ko Wing-man said the situation this winter is similar to last year's, a point echoed by Dr. Ho.
Sometimes the mutation will make the virus more transmissible, sometimes it make it more aggressive in causing illness. But this time, the mutation that we have doesn't involve those. We have a mutation that mainly affects the effectiveness of the vaccines.
Despite a drop in the protection rate of the flu jabs because of a vaccine mismatch, Dr. Ho joined the health chief in advocating vaccination.
Dr. Ho also reassured us that the Swiss strain of H3N2 influenza is not resistant to Tamiflu, which means the common antiviral medication is still effective in fighting it.
And the number of patients affected by institutional outbreaks has jumped, with 40% of these outbreaks occurring in elderly homes. Geriatrician Dr. Paul Scheer called on people to pay attention to the health of their elderly relatives and seek treatments for them if they fall ill. Liz Yun, TVB News.
An annual survey shows that Hong Kong is still 6th in Asia as one of the region's most livable cities, but that it also fell by 16 places to 33rd globally. The study blames the recent political turmoil for the sharp drop in Hong Kong's global standing. But the authors of the study also noted that many cities ahead of Hong Kong have stable, democratic governments. The annual survey by human resources consultancy firm ECA International assesses the overall quality of living in more than 450 cities around the world. It does so by looking at data on factors such as social and political tension, air pollution, health risks and facilities, infrastructure, education and security. Although Hong Kong still ranks highly as a place for expats to live in, the city's global attractiveness dropped 16 places from 17th in 2014 to 33rd in 2015. The research was undertaken during the third and fourth quarters of 2014, while the Occupy protests were taking place. and it blames the umbrella movement for this significant drop in Hong Kong's global standing.
It was the reason. There's no other reason. It was the reason. During the course of these protests, that had a considerable impact on Hong Kong's transportation infrastructure, the road network, public transport, both on Hong Kong Island as well as in Kowloon.
The study says that the uncertainty hovering over the city's political future will continue to weigh down on the city's attractiveness. But Hong Kong's monumental stumble of 16 places in the world ranking begs the question of which places have overtaken the city.
If you do look at the locations which are ranked above Hong Kong in terms of the global rankings, these are essentially relatively well-developed, advanced economies. One of the criteria of these countries is that they are all fully functioning, accountable democracies.
After years of sitting on the fence, the European Central Bank has decided to do what every other major central bank has been doing for some time and inject a large quantity of money into the economy through a massive bond buying program. Tonight, the ECB agreed to embark on a quantitative easing program, which together with its existing schemes will pump 60 billion euros a month into the Eurozone from March until September next year. The ECB hopes this will stimulate the flagging Eurozone, where inflation has turned negative and at minus 0.2% is far below the central bank's target of just under 2%. Japan was scrambling today to try to gain the release of 2 hostages held by the Islamic State extremist group. In a video message, the militants threatened to kill the pair by tomorrow afternoon Hong Kong time unless they're paid $200 million. Alan Buckner reports.
The Japanese government has said it will not give in to the demands issued by Islamic State. Japan's chief cabinet secretary said the government is doing everything possible to ensure the release of the hostages. But Yoshihide Suga said the country would not cave into terrorism and would continue to contribute to international efforts to combat it. He added it's an extremely difficult situation because other than the video, the government hasn't been contacted by Islamic State. In the video, a militant gave Japan 72 hours to meet their demands, which would put the deadline at just before 2 p.m. tomorrow, Hong Kong time. Japan's State Foreign Affairs Minister met with Jordan's King Abdullah II yesterday to discuss diplomatic efforts to gain the hostages' release. Yasuhide Nakayama is believed to be the envoy tasked with handling the situation in the Middle East. The ransom demand came after a trip to the Middle East by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. During it, he pledged $200 million in assistance to countries battling Islamic State. On the streets of Tokyo, opinion is divided on whether Japan should pay the ransom. This man said paying the money wouldn't guarantee the return of the hostages and would only place Japan in an untenable position among countries fighting terrorism. This woman said that while she knows they shouldn't yield to terrorists, she couldn't imagine that they have no choice but to let them die. She said all Japanese people are currently struggling with this dilemma. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
France is stepping up the fight against discrimination and inequalities in the country. As Tony Sabine reports, those issues are seen as some of the causes behind the rise of homegrown extremism.
Questions have been raised about the tough new security measures unveiled by the French government yesterday following the deadly Paris terror attacks. Among the initiatives announced by Prime Minister Manuel Valls, giving security forces better weapons and protection, hiring more intelligence agents, and creating a better database of anyone suspected of terrorist links. And at the European Union, there are plans to make the sharing of air passenger information easier. But that sparked concerns about privacy. It's drawing comparison to the US Patriot Act, passed in the wake of the 9/11 attacks in 2001. One top European official said the last thing they want to do is to change the nature of their open societies as a reaction to the terror threat. And civil liberties advocacy groups are warning against rushing the plan through without careful consideration. Besides cracking down on homegrown extremism, France also stresses the need to heal the divide between the country's haves and have-nots. The spotlight is now on life in the suburbs, home to some of the extremists linked to the recent Paris attacks. Many believe Muslims have been unfairly targeted over heightened terror fears. In the German city of Leipzig, about 10,000 people turned up for an anti-Islam rally last night. But they were outnumbered by counter-demonstrators who spoke out against the anti-immigration movement while defending multiculturalism. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
Premier Li Keqiang says the mainland's economy is still on the right track despite slowing growth. In a keynote speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, the Premier stressed the world's number 2 economy is not heading for a hard landing. Comparing the economy to a train, he said this train will not lose speed or momentum. Li said the Chinese economy will continue to feel downward pressure this year, but that simply reflects what's happening in the wider global economy. GDP growth on the mainland eased to 7.4% last year, the weakest since 1990. Back locally, the Environmental Protection Department has submitted a paper to the Legislative Council to regulate the disposal and recycling of electrical appliances and electronic equipment. Rani Samtani has more.
What do you do with your old electrical appliances when you buy a new one? The Environmental Protection Department has submitted a paper to the Legislative Council on the Producer Responsibility Scheme for waste electrical and electronic equipment. It covers 5 types of equipment: washing machines, refrigerators, air conditioners, televisions, and computer products such as desktop PCs, tablets, and printers. The Environmental Protection Department has proposed that every time you purchase a new electronic product, you can request the seller to take back the old appliance that you're replacing free of charge. The retailer or vendor can then arrange with the supplier for the old equipment to be collected and sent to a recycling service provider. This way, old electrical or electronic equipment can be collected more efficiently to be handled by a recycling facility. A number of shops say they already provide recycling services to customers with charges included in the price of the product. But some express concerns about additional costs if the proposal is implemented. Mr. Ho said his shop's expenses will increase if they have to arrange transportation for the waste equipment to be taken away. The Environmental Protection Department has suggested imposing a recycling fee on the supplier in line with the polluter pays principle. In addition, it has also recommended a licensing system for recycling service providers to prevent the e-waste from being sent to landfills, and a permit will be required to import or export such waste. Meanwhile, the department hopes to get funding approval by April this year for building an e-waste treatment and recycling facility. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
The Fire Services Department will hand over to the police its investigation report on last year's Shekip May estate gas explosion. Authorities will then decide whether a death inquest should be held. Diane Toe reports.
Concerns remain over how the deadly explosion last November left 1 principal fireman dead and 8 other firefighters injured. Today, Director of Fire Services Lai Man-hin refused to give details about an ongoing investigation into the incident. But he stressed that firefighters are well equipped and well trained to follow emergency response procedures, which are regularly reviewed. Lai said the investigation report will be handed to the police before a decision will be made on whether a death inquest is needed. The report will also be made public. At its annual review today, the Fire Services Department said it received some 36,000 fire-related emergency calls last year, a 1.2% drop from 2013. And fires that were graded number 3 alarm or above nearly halved to 6 cases. But ambulance calls went up by 3.8% compared with 2013, at an average of 2,048 cases per day. Over the 79-day period of the Occupy protests, the response rate to fire and emergency calls remained above target. In an equipment upgrade, the department has bought new thermal imaging detectors that will help with nighttime search and rescue missions at sea. Firefighters will also be getting new helmets that will better protect them in narrow environments. As for the new Fire and Ambulance Services Academy being built in Chengquan-o, construction work is expected to be complete by the end of the year. It will be equipped to offer 530 residential